MedBricks Webcast is a new kind of healthcare media channel to break the silo mentality and foster interdisciplinary thinking. Our mission is to fill that gap and to create a curiosity through different lenses, tapping the passion that guided the historical figures in medicine and bringing present-day groundbreaking research to the front lines. We interview physicians and leaders in the industry about present-day healthcare challenges on our live programming.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Ramesh. I'm the MedBricks webcast host today, also known as Ramakazi. So I'm a music artist and a researcher. So today I'm here with Dr. Tola, who Dr. Omotola Ajibade. And so Dr. Tola finished his residency. He's got a bachelor's degree in biology and a minor in music from Emory University, and he has a doctor of medicine degree from Mercer University and a master's degree in public health. So, following the successful culmination of his academic endeavors, Dr. Tola undertook and completed a residency in psychiatry at Ocean University Medical Center, and currently serves as a forensic psychiatrist, a fellow at Emory University. So, moreover, Dr. Tola has actively been involved within the American Psychiatric Association Foundation, currently serving as a justice liaison for the Schools and Justice Initiative. He is also an alum of the APA Foundation's Diversity Leadership Fellowship. So outside of his clinical work, Dr. Tola is passionate about his creative pursuits. He's an avid photographer, dancer, and musician. So welcome to the MedBricks webcast, Dr. Tola.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Of course. So I do have a couple questions for you today. I wanted to find out a little bit more about your field. So you said you're doing a fellowship in forensic psychiatry. So can you tell me a little bit more about what forensic psychiatry is?
Yeah, so forensic psychiatry is kind of a nebulous term, even among psychiatrists. I think the easiest way to describe it is a simple mental health issue plus a legal question that equals forensics. And that can take any number of forms. So like in the civil world, you start to think about issues related to like disability. Sometimes if there's an issue with somebody's ability to, like if there was like undue influence in the way somebody's last will and testament was handled, you could have a forensic psychiatrist go in and evaluate the situation and render opinions that way. In the criminal setting, it usually tends to involve competency to stand trial and criminal responsibility. And that's just the criminal responsibility piece is really for when somebody is considering or maybe has claimed an in court.
Okay, that makes sense. So I guess building off of that, what we do personally, what we do know is that at least 1/3 of calls to 911 are mental health crisis related. So do you feel that law enforcement is currently at a point where they're equipped and trained to deal with the mental health crisis?
Absolutely not, and that's not their fault. They just like there's the old saying that when all you have is a hammer, everything is a nail, and let's become that hammer in more ways than one. And so the way we train law enforcement isn't really to deal with mental health crises, and honestly, that's truly a shame, because if they're the ones who are being tasked with handling these situations in acute crises, then it really behooves us to equip them properly to handle those situations. It's sort of like saying you're going to climb a mountain, but you've got no, right? Like that's just not going to work out very well for you. And that's essentially what we've done to law enforcement in this country, is send them out to deal with difficult situations without the adequate tools or resources to handle it.
Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. So, with that being said, do you think there's any universal or uniform standards at all, in order that for dealing with mental health calls, especially in law enforcement?
To law enforcement, it really depends. There's a lot of jurisdictions that are starting to experiment with what we call co-responder models, where you have a law enforcement officer paired with, in some extremely rare cases, you might have them paired with a psychiatrist, a social worker, or someone who's been trained to handle mental health issues, so that they can work in tandem to de-escalate the situation. Because what tends to happen is when a law enforcement officer approaches a situation to themselves or to others, they tend to be trained to acutely try to neutralize the situation. And sometimes that means use of force that could end somebody's life. So by engaging with these co-responder models, um, the idea is that um, law enforcement, the typical law enforcement mechanisms would be a last resort if all else had failed. Some cities have received grant funding to sort of experiment with it. I know there are places in California that are doing it. And even here in Georgia, there's a community up in Gainesville that has started experimenting with that kind of model. Um, I personally like the idea, but I think the data, at least in the American context, is still a little too green to be able to say, like, yes, this is the thing that works and this is what we need to do.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I was actually watching this show on Netflix the other day, and it is a show. I can't remember what it's called, but basically the premise of the show is that they decide to open the gates for all the inmates. They open the cells and they just let them, form their own community to kind of see how that kind of changes their interactions and even just their mental health for I think 30 days. And I'm still watching it, but I'm wondering if that's
I'm watching the same show. My cousin was like, you have to see the show. I want to get your take on it. I'm a couple of episodes in. Um, Fundamentally, the way we've organized our carceral system, and that's jails and prisons especially, um, is dehumanizing. We essentially keep people trapped like animals in a cage. And like in the show, in a couple, I think maybe it's like the second episode, they start to talk a little bit about like the alpha mentality with
yeah.
the in the system for a while, trying to basically dictate what the rules are for the community. Um, and like the when I've worked with inmates even before my fellowship, or former inmates, I should say, even before my fellowship, I'm telling them the way people survive in prisons is like being a wolf in a cage. Because when you look at the origins of like the quote unquote alpha male idea, it came out of I forget the guy's name, but he was a researcher who studied wolves in zoos.
Mm.
And these are wolves all from different packs who don't know each other, haven't formed relationships, can't trust each other, and so they react very violently to their surroundings. Meanwhile, when you study wolves in the wild, who are free, who have life, they operate very differently. And so the way that we have built our carceral systems in general across the board in this country is essentially creating wolves in cages. And then, especially if they're incarcerated for a long time, we train them to only think about how to survive the cage. and then send them out into the world, which is essentially just a bigger cage for them. It's not really freedom. And so that helps perpetuate this idea of, or the cycle of recidivism. I like the premise of the show. I do think that there is need for more of that kind of work. Um, uh, but it's unfortunately it's too few and too far in between in this country.
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought up the wolf study because the I do remember reading that the that myth of the whole alpha mentality it has been debunked because of those those circumstances. So one thing that has always I've always been interested in understanding the root cause of recidivism. So with that being said, do you think that what would you say are some of the predictive factors of a either a mental health decline that could lead to recidivism, um, or do you think they're predictive factors before um, someone is released or before someone is even incarcerated?
Oh, absolutely. Rowe and his team at Policy Research Associates came up with this idea called the sequential intercept model. Um, it goes from stage zero, intercept zero to intercept five. So there's like six critical points in a person's life as issues where they go through the criminal justice system and come out on the other side. And maybe the cycle repeats, maybe not. But at each juncture, it's called an intercept. And there are specific things that you can think about doing at every step of the way. So when they're out in the community and um, have no criminal justice involvement. That's where you get things like 988 crisis lines, being able to take somebody, being able to do an emergency psychiatric hold to get somebody evaluated and start sources. And then that intercept one is really, to me, it's a critical point for the earlier point that we were discussing about law enforcement involvement. So at that point is where you start to see ideas around like training law enforcement to do crisis intervention work, or maybe having alternative models for like the co-responder model that we talked about before, or getting, or if a police officer is called out immediately, maybe instead of trying to handle the situation uh, through a law enforcement mechanism, which usually that ends up taking the person to jail, which ends up being a very scary situation for them. Um, Rather than doing that, maybe you could divert them back into the hospital by immediately calling an ambulance to come take them in. Um, so, like at every point in the process, when they show up to court for their first hearing, that's an intercept. If they get moved into a specialty court, so like for instance, here in Fulton County, Georgia, where I work, we recently developed I felt like I had a hand in it. I did not. um, but there is now a competency restoration court, and that's purely for people who have a mental health issue and have a criminal case before the court, and really look to help them become competent to handle their legal case and move forward with their lives. And there's a phenomenal team of people working on that in, in my role in my current fellowship program. All I do is the court evals, but on the other side of that, there's a whole team of social workers and lawyers, both on the prosecution and defense, that are doing phenomenal work. So, like at every point in the intercept, there's something to be done, and there's a whole process even for how you map that out for the community.
That's interesting. So it seems like you and your team have been doing, I mean, you've done a deep dive into the root cause as opposed to just kind of touching on the symptoms. So with that being said, what does rehabilitation look like in an ideal world for you? Like, what if you were able to design a rehabilitation center to tackle these issues? What would the process of rehabilitation be?
Um, I think for one, it has to be individualized. It can't be there's no cookie cutter approach to this because there's only like I have an identical twin, and there's only like if you drill down to like the subatomic level, the constellation of subatomic particles that makes up me is fundamentally different than the makes up my brother, even though we have the same exact DNA structure. So like the even at that level, the goals for each person has to meet their specific needs. You meet them where they at, and you help them get to where they're trying to go. Um, a long time ago, like one of the last bills that President Kennedy ever signed before his assassination was something called the Community Mental Health Act. Um, and one of the things that it was supposed to do building of localized community mental health centers so that we could stop warehousing people. Back then, it was in the hospitals and they were overrun. Um, but after he died, the funding never quite made it the way it was supposed to. It hadn't quite that didn't quite pass the test in the real world, unfortunately. And so a lot of folks ended up leaving the hospitals and going into jails. And that's that. It's really unfortunate that that's what became of such a beautiful idea.
So, I guess to build off of that, how much do you think the government has been slash is able to be involved in the formation of rehabilitation as opposed to just imprisonment? Do you think that there
Um,
are programs that are helping to support?
yeah, there's a variety of programs like at the state and federal level. A lot of it is a huge part of it is really just it like comes down to like legislation. Um, until you write something like in the world we live in, unfortunately, until you put pen to paper about it, uh, folks like nobody's going to take you seriously. And then if you really want to get taken seriously, you have to back it up with funding. And in recent years, at least, there's been a greater, I think, after we've all suffered collective traumas from like the COVID-19 pandemic and all of the stuff that went on around that time, it's really become clear to everybody that there's a huge mental health crisis, and we are starting to take it more seriously. Um, so that's a big part of it because, like historically, mental health, for example, wasn't reimbursed at the same rate as like going to your primary care doc to get tested for like diabetes and stuff like that. Psychiatrists really ended up becoming like cash only practices, which doesn't serve the community because there's like if you think about there's something in the mental health world called the downward drift hypothesis. um, a lot of times they talk about it in terms of the cognitive that happens as a result of chronically untreated mental health issues, where you have an episode and then you drop, and then maybe you come back up to where you were, but as you continue to have more and more episodes, it becomes harder and harder to get back to that stage that you were before, before you started showing signs of your illness. And that also has a social component too. In that, like when we look at our homeless population, those with mental health issues and substance use issues are overrepresented in that community as well. And that trajectory of the downward drift follows a similar pattern in a social context as well as a neurocognitive or neuropsychiatric context.
So I've I've heard situations where maybe a homeless person who as winter's approaching, they might try to you know do something that will essentially put them in, get them imprisoned to where they have, three hots and a cot, or where, some people, once they are released, they have the mentality of, well, jail is all I know. That's what I know. And they almost want to go back. So do you think that they, within like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that there are certain, I guess, needs or aspects that would tend to draw people back into jail based on like, um, how kind of, jail or their circumstances have kind of shifted their perception of their psychological needs?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like when you think about it, well, first of all, this is the part that it shocked me the first time I learned about this. The only time in America that you are guaranteed a right to health care is if you are incarcerated. So like that's like it blew my mind. It's consistently unsettling as I've gone on in my training. Um, when you think about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like what do you get when you're in jail? Usually you get a roof over your head. So like nothing is raining down on you unless like the roof is a possibility in a lot of our jails in this country. You get maybe not the most nutritious meals, but at least you get regular meals. You have somebody who's legally obligated to at least give you your medications, whether depending on where you're at, whether you take a different story, and whether or not they force you to take it is a different story. But when you start to think about those basic survival needs, the idea that someone um, would go from an unhostile environment like being homeless into a semi-stable state like a jail setting, that becomes a weird, twisted, adaptive response. Um, and the way you break by making sure that the reasons the reasons that led them to go back to the jail or back to the prison are minimized or non-existent. So, and that's part of like when going back to the idea of like the sequential intercept model, when you start to address those intercept, you can offload some of those people and help them live a life that's meaningful to them. Um, I think that should always be the goal, but whether or not, but we are far from there. I'll say that much.
So I want to add another factor into my next question. Do you think that the entertainment that we consume, and we as, the public, do you think that the entertainment that we consume, from, maybe action movies to some of the topics that we might hear more often in hip hop in today's climate, do you think those elements kind of, um, shift the public perception of, incarceration, and therefore do you think that has an effect on those who are, maybe dealing with mental health issues and their perception of imprisonment?
Um, that's it's complicated. I don't know that there's a I don't know that there's a direct like one-to-one correlation. Um, I think in this day and age with the people openly discussing their mental health issues in our news media, in our entertainment media, makes it more likely that somebody's going to reach out for help. I mean, like Logic is very famous. The rapper Logic is very famous for talking about his mental health issues and like literally named a song after the suicide hotline, which did wonders for people who were going, especially young people who are going through crises, because there's a serious crisis amongst like amongst every demographic, but especially among our young, like even when I'm not working in jails and I see little kids in the ER, it always breaks my heart to see them like going through some of the things they're going through. The media certainly has a positive role to play in that. I think, but I imagine that it could also have a negative role in that there's messaging that comes along with each piece of media that we consume, and a big part of how we move things forward in that respect is really comes down to media literacy for not just the young people, but our our peers and our elders as well.
And do you, so out of all the cases that you've seen, what percentage turned out to be success stories, and were there any elements of their stories that you think is applicable to other cases?
I think it depends on how we're defining success and in what context. So if it was like in the hospital, um, if we're talking about recovery from an acute episode, there were honestly quite a few people, um, and like you can't underestimate the impact that you'll have in somebody's life. Um, I remember when I was finishing up residency, was a patient that I was treating in my senior year that I had apparently treated as an intern when he was having his first like run-ins the with the mental health system in general. I have no recollection. I can look at my note. I think I hopped a plane flight out to Nigeria to go visit family right after I saw the kid all those years ago. But he remembered who I was, and he told me that encounter really left an impact on him. And the interesting thing about watching someone recover from an episode is like there are these weird markers that you don't really expect. Like where I trained, um, we had a lot of like multi-ethnic close by. So like um, the running joke, one of the hospitals I trained at was in Perth Amboy, New Jersey. The running joke was all roads lead to Perth Amboy. And when someone was acutely psychotic, sometimes they would revert back to their native English was their second language. And when you treated them and as they got better, you could actually watch them become more fluent in English. And that was always like, that was a fascinating thing to watch. Um, but it was also like one easy, like, class, what you're doing is actually helping this person. Um, Success in the setting that I'm in is that I hope to God that the folks that I'm working with, they are able to get out if depending on whatever crimes they committed, if that's an option, that they're able to get out and then they have the resources on the other side to stay out. Um, because like jail is jail isn't always is rarely a great place for anybody.
Awesome. And I have one more question for you. Speaking of success, what are your goals with the Justice Initiative?
So right now I work with the APA Foundation, doing like really helping some of the fellows who are working on justice-based initiatives, um, to put together a variety of um, each year each cohort of fellows does something different. This is my first year working as a justice liaison for the APA Foundation, but so I can't really speak on what's gone on before me, but to work on we've tried to work on projects that are aimed at like educating the general public, but also with a long-term pie in the sky goal of working more directly with law students to help some of them who are going to do this kind of are going to do work in the criminal arena understand a little bit more about mental health issues. That's one of the things that I hope to continue to do in the coming years.
Wow, that's awesome. I really appreciate your time speaking with me today. So, yeah, thank you again, Dr. Tola. I'm going to pass it to
Thank you for
Ramana.
having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm now going to pass to Ramana, and he's going to speak on the immortal woman of John Hopkins, also known as Henrietta Lex.
Thank you so much, guys. You're talking so low voice, but I tell you, profound subjects. You're really talking extraordinarily important for the society. It is so important. You really, I can listen to both of you for hours. It is such a, you went on to very deep, that understanding the societies, that both of you exposed it to. Ramesh also, my son is Ramesh, actually. He was also a member of AREACH, a organization. They do virtual reality and neurofeedback, which I designed it as a brain cafe. One day Ramesh can show to Dr. Tola,
Yeah,
that
absolutely. I'd love that.
yeah. So that is, I think, he worked with the disadvantaged youth, and I think both of you have so much to offer and so much to listen to. We hear all the leaders and all the positive things and all lovey-dovey stuff. This is the time to really nitty-gritty the real things society needs, at the bottom to the up, everything we need. We cannot ignore anybody. Actually, I'm going to present a topic on that, and a woman, she did extraordinary contributions to the medicine. So we're all going to listen together, and you can jump in. Any one of you can jump in and make a comments. So I'm going to. That is a Dr. Omotola Abajedi, is a forensic psychiatrist from Atlanta, Georgia, my hometown. Okay, so it is a it is going to be. Okay, all of the us watching in the, so that is a fascinating talk. That is a Ramesh Annamaraju, is a neuroscience graduate from Vanderbilt, and then is doing music research now. So that we could listen to them, very fascinating discussion. Anyway, I'm going to talk about a little bit. This is about in 1973. His name is Michael Rogers. He was Rolling Stone hired him to go to India to cover a solar eclipse. The Concorde plane is actually 73 minutes, the longest eclipse to be covered by a Concorde plane. So there's a story for that, and he flew down to Indian desert, Sahara Desert in India. So what happened was, it was not a fun experience for him. He got dysentery, he got a lot of problems. Then he got robbed, he got beaten up. So he lost all his photographic equipment. He lost everything. So he came back to the Rolling Stone and he made up a story. He just faked a story, and then he wrote about the solar eclipse. And then American Academy of Sciences gave him a prize. They gave you a prize for the fake story. So then Rolling Stone said that he has to be our permanent science writer for the Rolling Stone, rock and roll magazine. They want a science writer. So Michael Rogers became a science writer. One day he was in a he didn't like it. He wants to interview Jimi Hendrix or somebody like that. He doesn't want to do science writing for science writing for the Rolling Stones. But so he has to do that. They assign him science writing only. So with a reluctantly, he went to University of California, right here, San Francisco library, to do some research. So find out what the interesting stories. Then he went to a restroom. He saw in the restroom is called Helen Lane Lives On. He saw it's some graffiti in the restrooms. The people write all kind of nonsense. That's one of the things he saw, and it stuck in his mind. Something interesting. Why they wrote that? That he came back. Then he found out in 1970. That's he did in 1973, 76. Then he wrote an article. It's called Double-Edged Helix. In he wrote in this Rolling Stone magazine in 1976, March 1976 magazine. He wrote Rolling Stone's double edged helix, edged helix, about a story. A story is about the first time revealed is not everybody is going. That is the immortal woman of John Hopkins, Henrietta Lacks. That is not a Helen Lane. They were misrepresenting or they're telling a wrong way, wrong name because they wanted to mislead people. They don't want to reveal the names of the donors, names of the contributors. So there is a privacy, is a discrimination, all of them involved. So that is the story of he wrote the story of immortal woman of John Hopkins. Michael Rogers wrote first time in Rolling Stones. It appeared in the Rolling Stones. Nobody knows until that time. So, that any other lax is she was born in Roanoke, Virginia. She was close to the Washington D.C., close to that area, and then she was born in 1920, and then she was born in the slave quarters. Actually, on the left side, you see that is a slave quarter. Actually, she moved there, and then she married at the age of 14. Those times, even India and in Africa, that Dr. Thola may know, they're all getting married at the age of 14. So she got married at the age of 14 and she had 5 children. She moved to Baltimore, Maryland. That's where she has some problems she encountered because of some health problem. That is that she has uncontrollable vaginal bleeding in 1951. She was 31 years old. She moved to Baltimore, and then she was having a problem with the vaginal bleeding, uncontrollable. So she went to this only place she can go at the time is a John Hopkins. That's the only place the blacks are allowed to get a treatment. Can you believe that? It is unbelievable. So she went to the John Hopkins to see a doctor. His name is Dr. Howard Jones. She met. Let me move that. She went to see Dr. Howard Jones. He is one of the eminent gynecological surgeon in vitro fertilization. He is the one who delivered the first test tube baby, in vitro fertilization baby, the Elizabeth Carr. He was the first one did in the United States. Dr. Howard Jones. He's a very well known OBGYN doctor, is a surgeon, gynecological surgeon. So what he did was she went to see him. And he had a lax, went to see him, get checked. So he suspected that is something about he was doing a lot of work on the cervical cancer. Human papilloma virus is that is something about the cells, basal cells that in the near the cervix. These Dr. Thola may know better than me. I'm not a doctor, so I'm going to give a basic description of that. It is a you see this virus. It is going to the basal cells in the bottom of the cervix. The layers. It goes actually sometimes it is possibly change the DNA of the basal cells, and then the basal cells produce other cells to go to the top. So that's some other way it got into the stressors. I don't know what the communication stressor that there is a lesion comes up in the lesion. The human HPV virus gets into the inside and go to all the way to slowly develops the cancer. It becomes a cancer. It becomes a cancerous. That's what I understand. Dr. Tola, correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, so just with a very limited knowledge of medicine I have.
So far,
So
so good, sir.
yes, sir. Was good. Then Dr. Jones took a small piece of a tissue and they sent it to the lab. As the beginning of the lab, the tissue culture lab is coming out. George Otto Gay, his name. He has a lab, his own lab. It's nothing to do with John Hopkins. He was a lab on his own and with his wife, and then he sent a tissue culture there. What he did was that tissue was what happened was he is a very interesting guy, very good scientist. Is a little bit of a discriminatory kind of guy, but he invented the. He's a good scientist. He invented the roller drums for the pathology. Okay, that's a very so he was he what he did was what he found out is interesting that that these cells, human cells outside of our body, they die within hours or days, not more than a few days. They won't survive long time. But what we found is astonishing, that's the Neanderthal cells. that he got the tissue from the hair, that cells are doubling every 24 hours. It's stunning. It is just it's a kind of a mysterious thing. These are Henrietta Lacks, Gila, because Henrietta is the first name of the first two letters and the last name of the last two letters. Okay. This is a stunned, the scientific community was stunned. There's no way it is possible outside of the body that survive and multiply uncontrollable. They're just not only they're doubling every 24 hours, they're contaminating everything that any cells that come across. It is a mystery. It is a very mysterious, but what they found an advantage to do that. What the advantage is that they can they're using the live people, humans. If you use the drugs or toxins to test it, hormones, viruses, you cannot test on live humans because they die. They can affect it, they get sick. So it is a came as a boon. Heal our cells. They're not dying it. They by the time most of the research you need a long time to check on that. So healer cells are not dying. So it was a boon. So the bypassed the live humans and really gave a new idea is testing on the healer cells itself. So that is a big shift in the. It is really saved the. So modern cell biology. It is a. So this guy Otto Gay is a very interesting guy. He really she's instrumental. Then they got the electron microscope during the time, and then he also invented the because the cells growth he wanted to show and the cinematography, slow motion cinematography was born right in John Hopkins. Can you believe that in the lab, molecular lab created that movie things that you see nowadays. So this guy was was radium. They gave a radium therapy, but it did not work within short period of time. Within a month, the Eniata Lax died in October. On the same year, she died. But she lived on a different way. A cell soul became immortal. Healer cells, healer cells lines saved humanity. Then he created new vaccines, polio vaccine, COVID-19. Even COVID-19 was tested on the healer cells. HPV virus vaccines. It created a virus to save the humanity. So healer cells are really came as a boon to the researchers. Then so the John Salk, if you see that he attributed the credit to the healer cells that he did the polio vaccine, it is 18 million children would have got the polio virus were prevented because of the polio vaccine. 18 million children were saved from the polio onslaught because of the healer cells that he got the vaccine done, the John Salk. So HPV vaccine was born. 66 million people, women, would have reduced the incident rate by 50% of getting a cervical cancer because of HPV vaccine, because of the yellow cells. In fact, the person who found out the HPV virus in the yellow cells, that is the guy got the Nobel Prize. In fact, it is a Lancet and everything. They were doing a lot of work, but nobody. What they did was 66. What is that? The yeah, 50 million tons. I was surprised. That's a lot of cell lines that sold in billions or trillions of cells. Actually, they sold to the thing. Incredible contribution to human health. There were that many cells went away. 110,000 scientific studies were published on HeLa cells. 110,000 studies. That's an amazing. So that I was surprised at 55 million. I re-verified it. In fact, it is true. Thermo Fisher right here is located here. One of the in San Jose. It is their company sold one of the major product is HeLa cell lines. They now their company worth is $35 billion. The healthcare, Promega, all these companies sold health millions of billions of dollars they made by selling HeLa cell lines to the world. All the researchers in the world, it
it became a huge business, and nobody knows. Her family doesn't know. So it is an amazing. She is saving a millions of lives. Cancer, then morning sickness for the pregnant woman actually came out of the HeLa cells, the outside of the HeLa cells. They found out the drug for that. Cellular aging. Now maybe we'll be living for a long time, extending the longevity because of the HeLa cells. Then AZTH. That's all these things. They found out they are saving HeLa cells are saving millions of lives behind the scenes. That is the so she went to the Gila interstellar travel. So what happened is in the interstellar travel that they want to go to other planets. So the best way to check it is how the biggest threat to the interstellar travel is the radiation. Radiation. So radiation injury can happen. You see the cells on the left side that after 9 days they were damaged on the right side because of the HeLa cells found out that. So radiation is a big hazard in the interstellar travel. So when they want to travel to other planets, other stars, we need to. So HeLa cells gave a very good indication how you need to protect the first and foremost threat is a radiation injury, radiation exposure. That is the HeLa cells give. Then not only that, so Keytruda, that's a immunotherapy drug, a cancer immunotherapy drug, is actually, the what happens because of the gravity, most of the drugs that cells are flattened out. You cannot get it three-dimensional. So when you take them to the microgravity, the cells become a three-dimensional. You can see clearly the function of it. They're always three-dimensional, but you cannot see that because of the gravity here on the Earth. So when you go to the International Space Station, you can see three-dimensional. When you do three-dimensional, what they did was they redesigned the Keytruda to do the better healthcare delivery, the drug delivery system. They redefined and really helped the HeLa cell lines, helped in the Keytruda get the better health, better drug modifications. Why HeLa lines are immortal? There is a mystery. There is a lottery and a mystery, but my understanding is very limited about that. But these oncogenes, it's like a gas pedal. Usually when you are pressing a gas pedal, then it takes out our cell lines control the signals, death signals. So we have to take it out when you. Is what happened. The gas pedal got stuck. That means the growth was unlimited, the growth was uncontrolled. So some strange reason that is still is not everything is known about that. Maybe some theories are there, but HeLa lines are multiplying and saving life. Now it is amazing what she did, contribution to the world. We are talking about same humans. We don't, that what they did was Rebecca Skloot is another Harvard student actually wrote a book, the immortal woman of the John Hopkins, Immortal Woman. The book is a runaway hit. The Oprah Winfrey produced an HBO movie, and that is brought to a lot of people in the front, and then they were compensated. John Hopkins is building a huge building on her name, Henrietta Lack's name. So they are building a huge building, and they are going to do a lot of research for a woman. It is a contribution by this extraordinary woman, died a long time ago, but she continued to save millions of lives. She is the saving millions of lives. So we have to take care of all of them. This race, religion is all trivial. When you go to this, when you see those things from the space, we're all same human beings. Is really we need to respect each other and really do work on this process. So I think what she did was a lesson to all of us of the humanity. So these are people. There's two guests of mine, the host Ramesh and then Dr. Thola were talking about is such an important. Let them bring it to the main stage and see what they say about us. That that let me bring them a little bit. All of us,
So
yes.
I
Dr.
want to say,
Thola, what do you think?
I was just thinking it's very timely that you bring up Henrietta Lacks and her contributions to humanity, um, because this uh, the thing about Henrietta was that she was a mother, and this also happens to be Black Maternal Health Week. Uh, there's a lot of conversations happening right now in our zeitgeist about the health disparities among women in general, but especially among Black women. They're more likely to die in childbirth, suffer complications both during and in Henrietta's case. Unfortunately, care came too late for her, and especially with um, I can't remember the name of the model who recently died of cervical cancer. It just speaks to all of the issues that are going on, all the disparities and inequities that are going on in other contexts besides the ones that we've already been talking about.
Absolutely. I think you made an excellent point. Not only in the United States, we want to talk Africa, India. These are the people that discriminate, people under under that caste system, and all the people that do not have access to healthcare. Really, this is the world we have to change. We have to treat women in a equal partnership there, and then give access to the healthcare. Particularly these kind of diseases, you can be preventable. So pap smears, you can do pap smear test and continuously doing and testing that. That's what I understand. Pap smear can give us an indication that much more. It can give us a little bit of a preventive screening. So Ramesh, do you have any questions and they want to comment or comment?
Yeah. So first and foremost, that's a great movie and a great book. I think Oprah actually plays Henrietta Lack's daughter in the movie, so it's good insight for people who are trying to, start learning about, Henrietta Lack's backstory. But to your point, Dr. Tola, I'm aware, and I learned in grad school. I'm aware of a stereotype that exists among within healthcare that Black people, Black women have a higher pain threshold, and so sometimes that in certain cases that has led to um, being overlooked in crises and in certain situations that have led to fatal consequences. So I do think there is something to be said in correlation to Henrietta Lack's story, but also many of the cases that we've seen where Black women were overlooked in the healthcare system, and you know
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, unfortunately, medicine, especially in a Western context, has been so male dominated for so long that that like the ways in which we even do basic clinical around issues that are related to women's health actually is astounding. I think it's only been in the last couple of years, really, that menstrual products were actually tested with women otherwise and real blood, or at least things that can accurately simulate blood. Otherwise, it was just that weird blue dye that we all see on the commercials. The disparities that women go through across the board for improvement, um, and especially if they're half the population, they deserve just as much consideration, if not more so. Um, but yeah, thank you, Ramana, for uh, talking about the looks. Every time I hear someone speak about her, I learn something new, and it's just amazing the level of impact that she has had on the world.
I didn't know that today, this week is a Black Maternal Health Week. He said, it is always happens to me that kind of coincidences. It is truly both of you are the reason. He talks to my son. It goes and his mother is from a very small plantation town in South Carolina. He goes there and he understands the trivials and the tribute the healthcare disparities much more. And you're right in Atlanta. You are a doctor there, and then you are really Dr. Tola. I have to admire you. People wanted to make money, psychiatrists, there is so much waiting for everybody. You stuck to that big ideal that helping those people who society ignores to the rotten side. That's they are not human beings. And then you are really taking that, and I sincerely thank you for that. We need a people like you to be voices for those people, voiceless people. Thank you so much, and I really thank you for both of you. Yeah, amazing discussions. We need to come back and talk about it. You talk very slow, but it is a very very. You really made us such a powerful dialogues they did. It is so much education for all of us. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Dr. Tola, and thank you,
Thank you
Ramesh.
for having me.
So good night, all of you. And then let me play my usual music thing. And then after that, we come back and maybe stay there and we'll talk with you after this. Thank you.
We are retelling their stories through our patented designs that can be worn on scrubs, t-shirts, printed on conference bags, and endless other promotional materials. Daily Wear for Medicine is the first ever of its kind to create curiosity in medicine through visual art. We at MedBricks are celebrating unsung heroes of the past who made enormous contributions to the field of medicine through our unique campaign called Daily Wear for Medicine. You can wear it, carry it, and give it.